NFL's 100-plus year run, we've seen a lot of breathtaking plays. However, not all of these plays were legitimate, and thanks to some disastrous refereeing decisions, they stood. From botched fumble calls to missed pass interference, these are 6 of the most controversial calls in NFL history. What a better way to start than with the missed pass interference call in the 2002 NFL wildcard game between the San Francisco 49ers and New York Giants. No fan from either team will ever forget this game. From the Giants' perspective, it's really tough to put into words how much this loss hurts. The Giants entered the playoffs on a 4-game winning streak, and they dominated the 49ers in San Francisco, led by Amani Toomer, Kerry Collins, and Jeremy Shockey. They held a 38-14 lead in the third quarter. But then the 49ers, led by Jeff Garcia, mounted a shocking comeback, exposing the Giants' defensive struggles. In fact, their persistent linebacker weakness was brutally exposed by the 49ers, who took a 1-point lead. However, Collins and the Giants' offense managed one final drive, positioning themselves for a potential game-winning field goal. But just then, one of the most controversial calls in Giants history was about to happen. Long snapper Trey Junkin had a bad snap on what would have been the game-winning field goal attempt. The holder, Matt Allen, just couldn't handle the snap properly, and the Giants' kicker, Matt Bryant, was unable to attempt a kick. This led to a chaotic play in which Allen attempted to pass the ball to offensive lineman Rich Siebert, who was an eligible receiver during the play. Siebert was yanked to the ground while trying to catch the pass near the end zone, and a flag was thrown. Not for pass interference against the 49ers, though, but against the Giants for an ineligible receiver downfield. The 49ers took over possession and then drove down the field, eventually setting up a game-winning field goal attempt by their kicker, Jeff Chandler. Chandler made the 25-yard field goal, and the 49ers won the game 39-38 in a stunning comeback victory. Don't worry though, Giants faithful. The officials admit they got it wrong after the Giants had already lost the game and been booted from the playoffs. But that's nothing compared to Fail Mary at number 5. This howler from the referees has a strong case for number 1, but looking back at the circumstances, you really can't blame them that much. The official referees who were supposed to officiate the game between the Green Bay Packers and the Seattle Seahawks were on a labor strike, and they ended up being no-shows. This meant the use of a bunch of refs who proved themselves to be straight-up amateurs. But hey, you gotta do what you gotta do, right? Defensive back MD Jennings had gotten to the ball. However, Seahawks receiver Golden Tate had also managed to get his hands on it. This meant that both players got the pass and came down with it at the same time. Yeah, the officials were just as confused as everyone else watching, because while one called it a touchdown, the other said, it was not. To make matters worse for Green Bay, the confused officials of go home with the win. This left a sour taste in the mouth of the Packers, because after the replays were reviewed, it was crystal clear that an offensive pass interference should have been called against Golden Tate, which would have rendered his catch null and void, and handed Green Bay the win. Remember that I mentioned earlier that the regular match officials were on strike? Well, after this refereeing disaster, their terms were met, and they were called back to work immediately. However, this was after the damages had been done. Now, if you thought Golden Tate's controversial call was a real botch, then what do you have to say about the referees who mistook a helmet for a football? Sounds crazy, right? This laughable but controversial call happened in a 1998 game between the Seattle Seahawks and the New York Jets. Truth be told, the game was so boring that those who bought tickets must have wished they watched it at home. However, they were going to get an unexpected treat towards the closing stages when the Jets launched a long drive in a bid to score the winning touchdown. The ball was on the Seattle 5-yard line, and with the Jets faced with a fourth down, their quarterback, Vinny Testaverde, made the bold move of attempting a solo run into the end zone. Well, it ended up being the wrong decision, as he completely failed to cross the goal line. But for some reason, Testaverde's helmet appeared to look like the ball in the officials' eyes, and they awarded the highly controversial touchdown. To be fair though, this was 1998, and instant replays didn't exist at the time. The call stood, and the Jets won the game. A sour night for the Seahawks, but it was one that led to the introduction of instant replays the following season. I guess they took one for the greater good of the league. But hey, let's talk about the immaculate reception, where an intense game between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Oakland Raiders went straight down to the wire. See, the Steelers were down 7-6 with less than a minute to play, but that wasn't all they had to deal with, because with only 22 seconds left, they found themselves in more trouble with a 4th and 10 on their side of the field. At this point, the game seemed to be done and dusted for the Raiders, but Steelers quarterback Terry Bradshaw's throw, which was aimed at Frenchie Fuqua, was batted away. Franco Harris got the ball after the deflection, then dashed into the end zone to score the touchdown. This didn't seem controversial at first. However, it is important to note that the ball came off a Steelers man before the touchdown, which obviously means that the goal shouldn't have been awarded due to a double offensive touch. There would have been no issues if the deflection was off a Raiders player, and we wouldn't even be talking about the incident today. Unfortunately, this is one debate that might never come to an end, as both sides believe they have strong cases. But hey, ain't no way we're talking about controversial calls without talking about the guy who actually has a rule named after him, thanks to one huge moment of controversy. Yeah, I'm talking about Bert Emanuel. This call was so disputable that the league had no choice but to begin a massive overhaul of its rules. Now that's just insane. See, it all went down during the 1999 NFC Championship duel between the St. Louis Rams and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Unfortunately for the Bucs, they were behind in the closing stages of the game, but a scoring opportunity presented itself when Bert Emanuel picked up a 13-yard pass for the touchdown. At this point, Tampa players and fans believed they were in the lead and that nothing was going to stop them from going to the Super Bowl. Well, their celebrations were cut short after the officials claimed that the nose of the ball had touched the ground during the catch. And even though Emanuel was in total control of the ball as he hit the ground, the officials called it an incomplete pass, and that sealed Tampa's loss, much to the annoyance of the fans. And everyone went totally crazy. After this incident, the NFL created what is now known as the Bert Emanuel rule, which is meant to define what constitutes a legitimate catch. Creating an NFL rule all because of one guy? Damn! Dude's a legend. Someone get this guy in the Hall of Fame already. But hey dog, we're hitting number 1. And I bet there's no controversial game in NFL history like the one at Super Bowl 40. The Seattle Seahawks are involved once again, and this time it was against the Pittsburgh Steelers, both of whom were in smoking hot form at the time. Everyone expected this to be a tough battle, and it was, because the referees made some terrible calls to screw the game and cost Seattle the win. I definitely wouldn't blame you if you thought that the officials must have been on some juice that night, or that the entire game was rigged. How else would you explain so many bad calls against Seattle? After the game, referee Bill Levy admitted that his team of officials missed several calls throughout the contest, which certainly affected the final result. It was a tough thing for me. I kicked 2 calls in the fourth quarter and I impacted the game, and as an official, you never want to do that. It left me with a lot of sleepless nights. I think about it constantly. I'll go to my grave wishing that I had been better. This guy sucks. Trust me, because that's a lot of screwing up in one day to think a simple wish would make things right.